Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sabrina Kofer, and on behalf of Choice and ACRL, I'd like to welcome you to today's program. First Impressions Matter, Top APA Style Orientation Essentials, which is sponsored by APA Style. This session is one in a series of sponsored webinars from Choice and ACRL that addresses new ideas and developments of interest to the academic library community. I'll just put a couple links in the chat where you can register for upcoming webinars and watch previous webinar recordings. Before we get started, I'd like to point out just a few features of the webinar software. All attendees who join the presentation are automatically muted and your cameras are off, so don't worry about generating any noise or feedback. We've got that taken care of for you. In the main area of the screen, you can follow along with the presentation materials. To adjust the size of the slides or video, you can use the divider in the middle of the screen to slide the sizes to your liking. We are using the Q&A feature today. Please use it to ask questions of our speakers. We'll answer as many questions as we have time for at the end of the presentation, so please type your questions into the Q&A module as they occur to you. You can also use the upvote feature to highlight questions you like or would like to be addressed. Also, the chat is open for the session, and our presenters encourage attendees to submit their comments in the chat, though we do ask that everyone enters their questions in the Q&A box. Also, there's closed captioning available for today's session. To toggle the automated captions on or off, please use the CC button on the bottom panel of your screen. Last, please note that we are recording today's program, and everyone who registered should receive a follow-up email with a link to the archive version and where to access today's slides. And with that, we are ready to get started, so I will hand it over to Samantha. Oh, I think you're on mute, Samantha.
And we did the sound check and everything. So thanks so much, Sabrina. It's great to be talking to all of you today. Our webinar today is First Impressions Matter, Top APA Style Orientation Essentials. I'm here, my name's Samantha Denny. I'm the Development Manager for APA Style. And I'm here with my colleague Chelsea Lee, the Instructional Lead for APA Style, along with a panel of fantastic librarians, Laurel Scheinfeld from Stony Brook University, Carrie Forbes from East Carolina University, and Marilia Antunes from the University of Akron. And our conversation will be moderated by Cambria Sawyer, the marketing manager for APA. So today we're going to spend the majority of the time with a panelist Q&A, but we'll start with some tips for teaching students in your library orientation about APA style. After we have our conversation on getting student buy-in and best practices for introducing APA style, we'll go into our panelist Q&A addressing ideal workshop structure, LibGuide do's and don'ts, managing information overload, things like that. And then we'll have an open Q&A if you guys have any questions that aren't directly addressed in the panelist conversation. Then we'll talk about some recommended resources. So our first tip for you all is to spend a few minutes in your orientation getting student buy-in to APA style. So we know that students probably come to you with a lot of preconceived notions about APA style or academic styles in general, and spending just a few minutes helping them understand the why of using an academic writing style can be really important. I recently read a post in Inside Higher Ed called A Modest Style Proposal. And in it, the author said that students often see citation styles as a collection of at times maddeningly opaque rules that to students seem solely designed to satisfy the whims of the academy. And I'm sure this is not foreign to you all. I'm sure you talk to students who sometimes feel like APA style and APA style guidelines are not something that make a lot of sense. So helping them understand, the author of that post says later, academic integrity matters. Entering the scholarly conversation and attributing work properly matters. Style serves as more than a mechanical exercise. At its best, style facilitates a way of thinking and being in scholarship, supporting scholars to orient themselves within the broader academy. So at APA Style, we know and we work towards creating a style that contributes to good scholarly communication and communicating with clarity, precision, and inclusion. But we're aware that a lot of your students might not see that initially. So Sabrina or Ashley, if you don't mind putting up the poll, we just want to get a little bit of an idea of some of the things that you might hear from students about academic writing styles. Maybe some students think that it's just formatting and citation rules. Some think that they're created arbitrarily. Some people might think that they're rigid and unbreakable and maybe have a little bit of anxiety around APA style. Some might say intimidating or difficult. Some students are doing great, and others might tell you other things, which you can go ahead and share in the chat. So if you can just take a couple of seconds, what are your students kind of communicating that might be a struggle for them and therefore a struggle for you guys when you're doing your orientation? Okay, great. So it looks like a majority of people said that students find APA style intimidating and difficult. Some say that there's formatting and citation rules only. And then there were some people who said created arbitrarily and rigid and unbreakable rules. So I'm hoping today in our presentation, we can help you to kind of break down some of that anxiety surrounding APA style so they can feel really comfortable and know where to go and not be as intimidated by APA style. So to start, some students might come to you and basically say, why are we doing this at all? Why are writing styles important? So some students might think these are just a set of rules to prove that they can follow directions. And really, writing styles promote consistency and prevent writers from reinventing the wheel. Citing sources appropriately gives credit where it's due, and writing styles promote attention to detail, critical thinking, and precise and inclusive language. In addition, students aren't just writers when working with APA style. APA style can also help them become better consumers of information. As you all know, most social science research and research from a lot of health sciences and things is written in APA style or similar styles. Students often read before they write, and so really understanding how to read an academic paper in APA style and learning how to find information to skim and understand the different parts of a paper can be really helpful and important. So a great thing to add to your LibGuide is a link to our Anatomy of a Journal article. And as I give potential things that you can use, links to other places, Cambria will be putting them in the chat. And in addition, we will have a link list sent to you. So don't worry if you miss things or if you're not seeing everything, right away. It looks like the chat is really active today. I think I even saw this question come up really quickly in the chat. But another thing that some students might say is, why are there so many different citation styles? My high school teacher was talking about MLA. Why are my college professors telling me about APA? A great answer for that is to talk about how writing styles are discipline specific. So different disciplines prioritize different information. My favorite really easy example of that is how in an MLA paper, an in-text citation would have the author and the page number, whereas in APA style, it would have the author and the date. And the reason for that is because in an English class that uses MLA style, it's important that a reader can find the specific passage in, a book or something like that and see how the author wrote about it. Whereas in APA style, we're writing about people and science and how current a piece of information is, and the date is of more importance for somebody writing in the disciplines that use APA style. However, styles have more in common than they have differences. If they know MLA style or Chicago or something like that, learning the rules of another style is not as difficult as they might think. Most writing styles are going to address paper format, citation and references, word choice, punctuation, italics, capitalization, and numbers and statistics. We wrote a blog post about this. Chelsea actually wrote it, called Why Learn APA If You Already Know MLA. And that's a really great place to send students if they're interested. And we also have a free instructional aid that shows the differences between APA and MLA references, which might be very helpful for students who are more used to MLA. And then the final way to get kind of student buy-in into APA style is to reinforce that APA style is really useful for their future, whether they end up in a career or if they're going forward to, get an additional degree or something like that. APA style is used in psychology, business, education, health professions, and much more. And it's used in about 73% of bachelor's degrees, 83% of master's degrees, and 86% of doctoral degrees. The publication manual, which is, of course, our official source for APA style, has sold over 17 million copies as a result, and we have 1.7 million monthly style website visitors. So when learning about APA style for the first time, it's important that they know that this is something that's going to be helpful for their future, and it's going to teach them some great critical thinking skills. So Chelsea's going to talk about some best practices for introducing APA style.
Thank you so much, Samantha. So as I've seen in the chat, many of you are noting that it can be intimidating to have to learn APA style. And I certainly understand because there is a lot of it. And so when you're introducing it to students, it can be hard to know where to start. So here is our advice on that topic. So first off, what's the point? What's the point of having APA style at all? And the goal is to communicate, is to be able to communicate well so that we can understand each other and be able to move society in a good direction. And then the three main principles of APA style that we emphasize are clarity, precision, and inclusion, so that it's clear what you mean. You're being particular about the exact thing that you mean rather than having like vague generalities, and that you choose language that includes people so that people understand that they are being communicated to. So you're in the position that you're going to start teaching APA style or introducing it to students who maybe are skeptical. My advice is to start with 3 style areas to begin with: paper format, references, and inclusive language or language choices. And on the screen here, you see our APA style tip sheet. This is one of our free instructional aids that you can get on our website. Please use it. And that kind of summarizes the main ideas for these 3 areas. And so that's a really effective resource to take, a 400-page book and put it on one page of where to start. So if we look more deeply at paper formatting and what does it mean to get an APA style paper format, I want to emphasize how much of APA style can be accomplished by letting your word processing software just do its job. Just don't touch it. So like whatever the default font is in your word processing software, that's fine to use. The default margins are 1 inch on a paper. You don't have to change it, just leave it. For line spacing, set it to double. The default paragraph alignment is already set up to be the way that APA style asks for it to be. You can use the automatic functions for applying bulleted lists, for applying hanging indents. And so that allows you to use the tools that are built into your computer to help you make your paper look good. Likewise, you can use the styles menus to apply the formatting to headings. You can use the tables, the chart tools in your word processing software to make tables and figures. And so we really encourage you to use the tools of your word processing software. And the goal of that, of course, is consistency. And once it's consistent, it's like people don't even really notice. They can just focus on your information. So the next topic we're focusing on at the beginning is references. And what's the point of references? The point is to give credit, to show where the information comes from. Also, references help readers find and identify the works that you cited in your paper. And so when you're thinking about writing a reference for something, you have to think about it as like, would someone who looked at this reference know this source is what I meant to bring them to? And so that means that the information you choose to put in a reference should be relatively obvious. Usually it's on the cover or it's in the title page. If something is missing, like there's no issue number for a journal article, just omit it because it's missing. If it doesn't have a publication date, we use ND, which stands for no date, for a missing publication date. But the point is not to go digging through website source code or like looking in the fine print trying to find information, because the reader is not gonna do that much and try that hard. They need to pick information that's obvious to go into the reference. And the goal of identifying and being able to locate the reference is much more important than like the exactness of the formatting, of making it be exactly the same as every example. Because there's a lot of variety out there about what works exist, and not everything fits neatly. So with that said, looking more deeply at references, the way to build a reference is the same every time. You're answering 4 questions about author, date, title, and source. So for the author, you're asking, who's responsible for this? Who made this? For the date, you're looking at, when was this published? How old is it? For the title, what's it called? And then the source is, where can I get it? And so that might be the name of a website, that might be the name of a journal, plus a URL or a DOI. And so the example on the page here is of a journal article that has author, date, title, source, and that's a very straightforward reference, but all APA style references follow author, date, title, source. And really emphasizing this for students is effective for helping them understand how the reference is put together. Additionally, when you're evaluating sources, so that's another layer of using APA style to evaluate sources, you can use the 4 parts of the reference as a lens to help students look at the reference and decide whether it's trustworthy and worth including in their paper. So for example, you look at the author and you say, who are these people? Are they experts? Can I trust them? Looking at the date, you can figure out, is this information current or is it out of date? And how old the information is and whether it's still current is going to depend on the field. Likewise, titles give you indications of whether the work is relevant to the topic that you're writing about. And source information is going to tell you about something about the whether it's been peer reviewed. For example, if it's published in an academic journal, you know that other experts have looked at it before it went out there into the world, versus, maybe somebody's website that there wasn't that level of checking before it got published. And so using the reference parts as a lens is helpful to get students to understand how to think about a source. From there, you've read it, now you're going to write. We have this APA style research article activity that walks you through finding and analyzing sources step by step. The fields on it are fillable, and at the end you'll have like a summary of the source that you are evaluating, and that can be great on its own as an activity to use, or a way to include a summary of a study like as part of a larger research paper. And then the last style area that I want to emphasize is inclusive language. And what that means is using words that people recognize themselves in. So APA provides science-backed guidance on how to refer to people with dignity and respect. And the general principle is just to call people what they call themselves. And so we have a lot of guidance about a variety of topic areas, including age, disability, gender, race and ethnicity, sexual orientation, and socioeconomic status. All those guidelines are online on our website, and then this one-page handout is a brief guide that sort of gives an overview of the different topic areas. And the purpose of this is to help students think about the words that they choose when they're writing their papers, because being thoughtful about the words that you choose is going to help you communicate better. And so the last point I want to share before we move on to the panel is that ultimately with APA style, you're teaching people how to use a reference text. You don't have to know all the answers. You don't have to have it memorized, but you do need to be able to ask the right question and know how to look up the answer. And so it helps probably to know that our publication manual is organized according to the steps of the writing process. So stuff about overall format and ethical considerations when you're designing a study is at the beginning. References and information about publication is at the end. And likewise, throughout the book, information is in clearly labeled sections, like information on what font to use is in a section called font. The index is also really thoroughly done. And so helping the students learn how to use the reference text as a resource is a really valuable skill that will serve them well in, I think, all avenues of their life. So now we are going to move into our panel discussion.
Awesome. Thank you, Samantha. Thank you, Chelsea. I know it's a lot to take in very quickly, but some really helpful resources. I hope you are all getting those links in the chat and are able to make use of some of the stuff being shared today. And I want to turn things over to our wonderful 3 librarian panelists who have taken time out of their very, very busy days to come and share a little bit on how they approach APA style orientation, getting buy-in, and some of those things that Samantha and Chelsea covered earlier. And we'll kind of jump into the details of those things now and see how some of those situations are dealt with in practice. So I think I will address the first question to Laurel, and it's pretty open-ended, but what is your current process for introducing APA style and scholarly writing resources?
Thanks, Cambria, and hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. I offer APA-style workshops at Stony Brook University, and I've been doing this for a number of years now. I first got into it when I became the library liaison for the School of Social Welfare, and I recognized that there was a need on our campus for help learning APA style. I teach workshops that are open to the entire campus community, and I'm also invited to teach for specific departments. So I've worked with lots of undergraduates, graduate students, faculty, and clinical staff over the years. So there's 4 items that I wanted to share with you that I found to be effective for introductions or orientations to APA style. The first is that I no longer assume that attendees are coming with any prior knowledge of APA. So based on the types of questions I've gotten from attendees in the past, I've learned that just because they're college students or even faculty doesn't mean they're already familiar with APA style. So I do a quick poll at the beginning asking how familiar people are with APA style, and then I can pace the workshop based on the answers. If there are beginners in the group, which there usually are in an intro or an orientation, then I start at square one with what is a citation style? What is APA citation style? Where does it come from? I find that even if some attendees do have some familiarity with APA style already, then parts of the workshop may be a review or a reminder for them. And I don't think that hurts either. I find it actually kind of boosts their confidence that they already know something. The second strategy is I find it's important to be non-judgmental. This kind of goes along with something that Samantha was talking about. A lot of students seem to find APA style to be challenging, especially when they have to learn it on top of the subject matter that they're learning for their classes. So I find that acknowledging that and normalizing it can be helpful. So I do another poll at the beginning of a workshop where I show pictures of a walk on the beach, a twisting, dangerous road, and a car crash. And I ask the attendees to raise their hands or put in the chat which picture depicts how they most closely feel about APA style. And usually everyone gets a laugh, and it shows people that they're not alone if they find it challenging, and it seems to put them at ease. And I really think people learn better when they're feeling relaxed instead of anxious. So the third thing is to explain why whenever possible for a guideline. And I think Samantha also touched on this. So why does APA use the author date style for in-text citations rather than a number style or an author page style? Why is the publisher location no longer included in a book citation? You know, why don't you put a period at the end of a DOI or a URL? So understanding the why for these things makes these guidelines feel less arbitrary. And I think it also helps people remember them the next time they need to think about that guideline because it makes sense. It's logical, so it's easier to remember. And my last tip is to include active learning exercises for practice and reinforcement. I use a lot of what I call what's wrong with this activities. So for example, after I go over the proper format for a student title page, then I'll put up a slide with a sample title page that has a bunch of incorrect formatting. And I'll ask the attendees to pick out what's wrong with this title page. And people seem to enjoy these types of games. And at the same time, it reinforces how much they've already learned. So those are my 4 tips.
Thank you, Laurel. We're gonna have a lot of use with that information. Before I jump to the next question, Carrie or Marilia, do either of you want to add anything to Laurel's list?
I thought that was great, Laurel. I really appreciated that list so much. And I've already learned a lot from the previous slides that we picked up on I never thought to do the who, when, what, where when I'm explaining those 4 pieces of the reference. So I think that's really great. I've already learned a lot today that I'm going to add. One thing I like to do as well is I always try to make time to show students how to pull that reference from the database they're getting, but then also show them how to put it on the Word document or Google document, how to put the hanging indent on there, and then how to go back and fix each piece. Because I think a lot of times that's where they get tripped up, is that just that basic formatting that of course changes if you don't know how to transfer it correctly to your paper. Because a lot of times even the citation management software like RefWorks or whatever you're using, a lot of times even those don't exactly get it right. So I like to try to reinforce, you don't have to create this from scratch. You can get it from somewhere else. Let's just learn how to correct it before you turn it in.
Thanks, Carrie. And I think I'll just jump into the next question with you as well. What are some LibGuide recommendations you can share? And are there any absolute must-haves or mistakes to avoid?
So over the past few years, so when we first started, I updated, or I created a new APA LibGuide for our library, for Lapis Library at East Carolina University. And so I spent weeks on this LibGuide. So I wanted to make sure as many references were available. I put so much time into this LibGuide. And I still love it, and I still think it's a really helpful resource. But to be honest, more and more, I have started using the apa-style.apa.org as an easier source to use because of the search. And so I will often, even though I love my LibGuide with all of my heart, I have been more and more commonly referring students to that APA style page because it's easy to search, and sometimes it can be easier for them to figure out exactly where to find that reference they're looking for. I just noticed today actually that there's a new page on there that was specific for nursing student references, that I got really excited about because I'm like, gosh, this answers like so many of the emails that I get every day about how to do a government report or how to cite from UpToDate or Dynametics. So I love that this has automatically been done. So there are a lot of really great resources. Um, uh, I actually used to really not recommend OWL to my students because it didn't have the comprehensive information, but I think they've gone back and updated it a lot recently so that it's more comprehensive than it used to be. Um, I don't know of any don'ts per se, but that's my recommendations.
Thanks, Carrie. And I also did put a link in the chat to the LibGuide that you referenced that you've put together. If anyone wants to go take a look. And I think I'll move right along to a question more about balance. Again, for you, Carrie, how do you prioritize what to present during an orientation? Because I know there's so much. I mean, the whole publication manual is this thick. So how do you get across what's relevant and crucial for them to know at the very beginning while avoiding, information overload?
So generally, I work primarily, well, up until this point, I'm actually working more with graduate students now, but for the past 5 years or so, I've been working primarily with undergraduate nursing students. And so generally, when they're coming into the program, and I actually give them probably, I don't know that they love it, but they get a 2.5 hour orientation with me where we spend some basic time learning how to use the databases, some basic time just getting just the basics of Pico and learning how to use Pico for keyword um, suggestions, and then jumping into APA and spending time just with the basics, just going over that basic reference format. And much like Laurel, I also offer online workshops for my students throughout the semester. And up until this point, I've always just done the basics. But now I'm starting to think maybe I need to do more of a graduate level APA that focuses more maybe on tables and charts and some data that I don't usually get to in my other courses. And those are kind of the questions that I get a lot in my email. So I'm kind of thinking on this as I'm going along in this webinar today on how I might tweak these webinars in the future. But I really also loved, Laurel, how you talked about how you always assess at the beginning to see what do these students know already. And I think I'm kind of along that same line where I always try to assume that they don't know any of this. So I always try to go from a basic standpoint because we can always do the more the more in-depth things later. And another thing that I'm sure all of you, many librarians do this as well, but I always, always, always encourage my students, email me anytime. You're never going to bother me. I want your APA questions. I want you to reach out to me. I even have a Google Voice number that I use as a texting number that I'll tell students, just text me if you have a question. Just make sure you tell me you're a student so I know who you are. But I try to make sure that there is that open avenue for communication because I think one of the things that they love most about AI is how fast they get answers, even if the answers aren't correct. And so that's the problem is we try to create as many avenues for reaching out to us as possible.
Sounds like you have some very lucky students, Carrie, for that level of support from you. I'm sure they appreciate it. And I will say that we will cover AI a little bit later. I know people have some burning questions about that, so I'm glad you touched on that. we will make our way to that topic. Before we move on, Laurel or Marilia, is there anything you felt like adding about how you choose to prioritize what information you initially share with students, kind of balancing that info overload with being too high level? Marilia, it looks like you're on mute.
One thing that I do that has worked, I focus on the types of works that are required for the assignment. So we cover that information, and due to the time constraints of the library instruction session, and that has helped a lot, because the students are usually interested in what is required. And I found that, going back to what Carrie and Laurel mentioned, I found also that we do have a lot of support on campus, a lot of other faculty that cover APA, whether it's in social work or nursing. I found some faculty that have developed also in-depth guides, and I also collaborate with them. It also provides more information, and some of the students already know the faculty, so it makes that information a little bit closer to home.
Thank you. And I will direct my next question to you as well, Marilia. In terms of marketing your orientation, making sure the word actually gets out to people. If you host one in person, making sure they actually show up, things like that. How do you actually make sure that the information reaches your students?
I consistently email faculty throughout the semester, at least once a semester in my liaison areas, and I created a module on APA style, very in depth, and I mention the modules multiple times. Also, the authoritative APA style blog, which is excellent, which I love. Because you can create the best LibGuide in the world, but mine sometimes tends to be very long, and I found that most users usually don't scroll down or look for a specific citation information. So I promote the modules that way, repeatedly, and unfortunately, for a nursing class, the faculty member requires her students to complete the modules in APA, and they received a certificate of completion. It's been great because I can also track the usage, and I can go back and make changes. Another thing that I do to make a connection with students and to bring it more at home, I incorporate examples in APA that have been authored by either their faculty or someone in the department. So that also helps to be an interest getter, to make it more personable and closer. And I do emphasize the template. I'm very, the blog includes a couple of sample templates from APA, and I love that because I remind students it's already set for you and you can use it. I myself use it in my own publications. So I try to explain, as mentioned earlier, that I emphasize in particular that the citation tools in databases, they're great, but at the end, we are the ones being graded to ensure that that is formatted properly and it is accurate. So that and concentrate on the benefits of citing correctly. That has helped a lot.
I love how you brought up that you'll use examples from faculty and students and researchers from your own university. I think, like you said, that's a very personable touch and makes it suddenly very relevant and a lot closer to home too. It's not this style and this could be possibility somewhere out there in the future. It's right here and it's happening on your campus. So think that's a very thoughtful avenue to bring that point home. So we will move on now to the topic of AI, which I know everyone has had quite a few experiences with at this point, and will continue to, because it's not going away. So Samantha, I know you had a few thoughts on this, so I will kick things off with you and then maybe move on to Laurel. But Samantha, could you talk a little bit about the experiences we've seen so far with student use of AI?
Yeah, thanks so much, Cambria. This is particularly pertinent right now for me because our APA style blog, I just wrote a blog post that came out just like a week or two ago on teaching tips with AI. So definitely give that a look if you have some time. But some of the things that I think are really important when kind of teaching writing or having students think about APA style with these generative AI tools out there, I think one thing that's really important is to understand from faculty members some sort of consistency about like transparently stating what the faculty members believe about using AI. Is it one of those classes where they're not allowed to open ChatGPT, or is it one of those classes where there are good ways to use it? Having a lot of consistency is very important because a minority of universities have an APA, or I'm sorry, an AI policy in place right now. Some of them just put it under like a general plagiarism policy, which doesn't always translate. Our main piece of guidance is that while there is a lot of room for differences in beliefs about what constitutes plagiarism and what doesn't, we feel like the human has to remain in charge in any sort of research or writing context. So, for example, while AI can help a student understand a paper, they have to read the paper themselves. So keeping kind of humans in the driver's seat is one of the things that the APA style team thinks is really important. We also, I saw in the Q&A, somebody asked about, there have been so many changes to AI. Are we going to update our blog post? And we definitely have been talking about that. We know that it's a situation where things change so quickly that is something that is definitely on our radar. And I saw in the chat as well that people were talking about AI hallucinations. There was a paper that was published last spring that was basically, can generative AI write an APA style paper for a psychology class? And they found that right now, when somebody's trying to use AI to write an entire paper, a lot of the information looks correct, but it's actually filled with errors, unsubstantiated sentences, things like that. So I think it's just really important to be clear with the students that you need to write, you can use AI as a helpful tool, but that actually learning the subject of your paper and writing the paper yourself is going to kind of get you the best result.
Thanks
Laurel?
for addressing that question about plans to review and update, because I see a couple of people have been liking that in the Q&A, so I know that is a top of mind question for people. So yeah, I'd love to hear, Laurel, your thoughts on some challenges, workarounds, just all around tips that you have.
Thank you. Yeah, just to build on some things that Samantha was talking about, AI can be useful for a lot of tasks. In my experience, at least so far, it's not good at generating accurate citations. So besides the problem of the hallucinations, it also just doesn't format citations correctly. So if you're interested in using it as a tool to format your citations, be careful. I did try feeding a citation in another style into some different LLMs and prompted the LLM to put it into correct APA 7th citation style, and there were definitely formatting mistakes. Also, I've worked on a scoping review with several of my librarian colleagues here at Stony Brook. And that scoping review is on measuring the accuracy of APA style citations. And 2 of our included articles were on ChatGPT and APA citation style. And both of those studies also found that there were problems. So now, as Samantha mentioned, things are developing really quickly with AI, so it may improve. But at this point, the current point in time, I would say you still need to check your citations coming from any citation generator. Carrie was talking about this before, about showing students how to take the citation from the generator, use it as a convenience, but don't rely on it to be completely accurate. And that includes AI. So you can use it, try it out, but be prepared to still need to make some corrections to the formatting.
And I see one comment in the chat from Jennifer, thanks for your input, saying it's important to point out that it sometimes is more difficult to fix the mistakes, even though it might be quicker on the front end to put the thing together. You might end up spending more time in the long run. So I thought that was a funny but very true side note. Marilia or Carrie, do you have any experiences or feedback you'd like to add on the AI subject?
Not yet. I think we're still really early in using it in courses in our university, and it's so different from instructor to instructor on what they will allow a student to use it for. I am very clear if I like for instance, one of the things that I've been using ChatGPT for is helping me to come up with additional terminology when I'm determining a search, or if I'm trying to find additional search terms for a certain keyword. But if I'm ever using it in the context of, like maybe I'm using it to help me say something better in a PowerPoint, I will always make sure to note that on the PowerPoint, just as a guide for students to see, where we always want to cite when we're using this, if we're using this, because, that's not fully my language. I didn't fully create that.
Yeah, and I want to add that also I remind them that we are being graded, and that despite the tool that we use, regardless, is up to us, to the students, to ensure that the reference is accurate, and as it was mentioned earlier, it's still new, and sometimes the information is made up. I have tested that, and I've seen it, and so I'm hoping it improves, because I do get questions for a citation builder, but I still haven't found one that really works.
And I will note, I just dropped a link in the chat to a recent webinar that we hosted on using APA style to improve information literacy and combat misinformation. So it's not directly AI themed, but we of course do cover that subject because it is very relevant in that space. So with that, I will switch gears just a little bit and open it up to the Q&A in general. Thank you so much for all of the engagement and all of the questions you've submitted. I do not think we will be getting to all of them in the next 10 minutes, but we will try our best to answer as many as possible. So I will just look over at my list. And there were a few very interesting questions. One I thought was a bit unique. So someone said, one of my biggest struggles is that the students come to me for APA formatting help, and I ensure it is correct. But whoever the grading faculty member is does not know APA style as well as they should, and takes points off for things that are actually correct. I have done multiple faculty training sessions, but it doesn't seem to make a difference. Any suggestions for that kind of situation?
I actually, well, I guess I don't have, it's not necessarily a suggestion, but what I always frame to my students is that the instructor has the final word. And APA has made that clear in the textbook is that, you know, you do have to go by what your instructor is saying is correct, whether or not it actually is by the book. And I have run into that before, but I always try to frame that, whether I'm answering an email or whether I'm working with them in a Zoom, that, you know, this is what I'm giving you. This is a suggestion. I'm going by the APA manual. However, if your instructor feels differently, this is what you have to go by.
Something that we're doing as APA is also to move the perception about APA style being like this draconian thing that's out to get you, and instead looking at it as a set of guidelines that can help you make decisions when you're writing. And that sometimes there's situations that don't have one obvious answer. There's maybe multiple ways that you could approach the situation, and the most important things are to make sure that you're communicating and that you're being consistent. And so we're really hoping to like put down the red pens and focus on, are you communicating and are you being consistent? And that hopefully that can help move it away from like caring about whether a comma is italic or not. Like in the scope of things, that does not matter. You know, there are much bigger fish to fry.
Yeah, ideally, we would like, it's important for students to learn how to do things that are correct in APA style, but at the same time, we know a lot of the anxiety is surrounding like huge point penalties and things like that for things that might seem small. And we would definitely recommend for faculty, you know, to, as Chelsea said, focus on the communication rather than, you know, if you don't take off a ton of points if something is formatted just slightly incorrectly. I do think there is a difference between like the instructor preference, like maybe the instructor wants like a wider margin for some reason or something like that. I have heard about instructors being outdated a little bit in terms of I know one librarian told me that a professor like didn't know what a journal article number was, so they wanted the student to like make up page numbers, which from a scientific perspective, it's not going to get anybody to that paper. So I do think it is worth it to try. Somebody mentioned, Christine mentioned in the chat, to try and get those points returned to the student. Like if it is where the instructor is completely wrong, I don't know if there's a nice way to frame an email to not come off to come off nicely, but you know, reinforce that there's a reason why the student did what they did.
That's a great suggestion, Samantha. Do you guys have a blog post or anything sort of reiterating that on the, you know, on the communication versus the nitpicky
No, but we could.
comments?
I definitely can't promise anything, but that's something that we could think about kind of communicating more. Yeah, Chelsea, were you gonna add
No, I
something?
think it's woven into a lot of the things that we say. And it's hard to say that as well, because it's like if I tell you that whether a comma is italic or not doesn't really matter, and then people are like, well, why do you bother having rules at all? And then it just falls off, the discussion falls off the rails. And the point is that like there is an answer to the question about these little nitpicky formatting things, but it's all about keeping perspective and having priorities in terms of your communication and making sure that the message is coming across. And so I think framing it as guidance and thinking about the priorities of communication is really essential.
Somebody put they have a good, not perfect campaign. I love that.
I like that.
That's
It's a
great.
good way to
Everybody
sum it
needs
up.
an editor. Like nobody's perfect at it. So we're just doing your best.
So I will try to speed through maybe one or two more questions. I do see a few questions popping up both in the Q&A and the chat about academic writer. And that is a whole different topic in and of itself. But if that is something you're interested in discussing further, I know some people were asking about demos and quotes and things like that. I will send an email in the chat. Just shoot us a message there saying you're interested and we'll take care of you. Another question, what are your successful tips or strategies when working with international students who may be familiar with a reference list, but not in-text citations?
I'll kick us off. I think one thing that's really helpful is that research article activity that Chelsea shared earlier. That walks them through actually reading the article, doing the paraphrasing, and then the in-text citation. So that can be a good way to kind of reinforce and practice that.
Yeah, it's all about connecting the information that's in your paper to the source that it goes with, and making sure that all the sources that it goes with are in the reference list. And that, because that's something that people usually forget to check, and making like pairing them up. And I think maybe walking those students through the correspondence and how to check for correspondence can be really helpful, especially in like some disciplines. You might have works in the list that are not cited in the paper, and APA style, generally speaking, does not do that. It only works if it's in the reference list. You should be citing it in the paper for the most part. There's like exceptions to that I won't get into, but like for the student who's learning, you got to check, because then you're making sure that the reader knows what information came from where, and they can go look at it and see whether you interpreted it right.
Thanks, Chelsea. Thanks, Samantha. I know we have only a couple minutes left, so we have a few more slides we'd like to share, a few closing resources. So if we want to bring those back up, and we will close things out.
Awesome. Let's see. So, yeah, thank you guys so much. We wanted to pass on a couple of additional resources. One thing is, there's a recent blog post on tips for teaching with APA style. We know that a lot of times you guys have an hour to teach all of APA style. But of course, that's not the ideal way to really be teaching APA style. If you can find a way to encourage faculty members to teach it over time, so teaching a little bit over time, encourage faculty members to send students back to you to kind of help. Also teaching within the context of the curriculum, and I know one of our librarians mentioned this. So if you're teaching nursing, or I'm sorry, if you're talking to nursing students, use publications that are relevant to their subject area. Also, this is hard. We know that librarians are not all powerful, but encouraging instructors to teach APA style consistently is really helpful. So things like shared rubrics or department or program-wide standards can be really helpful, because it's hard when you have the one instructor who says, oh, do whatever you want, and then another that will take off 10 points for a period in the wrong place. So these are our general principles that we think are helpful. Also, you might want to link on your LibGuide to the APA Styles Beginners page. We have a really great orientation and a curated list of resources. And of course, our authoritative sources include the pub manual, the concise guide, and our website. We also have Academic Writer, as you might be aware. And we have a number of free instructional aids on our website. You guys are more than welcome to link to these on your LibGuides, or print them out and give them out as handouts. We prefer you do that instead of linking a PDF or having a PDF on your website, just because we might change them if there are changes. So using the links ensures that you have the most up-to-date information. Also, our next webinar was actually inspired by some of our librarian guests who asked really great questions about some new or unusual reference types. We have a webinar coming on April 22nd where we're going to talk about references that you might not be citing every day. Things like legal references, AI, different types of, new technologies, things like that. So that should be really good for any student, faculty member, librarian who works with references. And finally, I hope some of you are coming to ACRL. If you are, we have some great things planned. Cambria and I are both going to be there in person. We'll be at booth 825 and stop by for fun giveaways, APA style trivia, and some very special updates. The updates are not related to the 8th edition, so don't worry. There is no 8th edition quite yet. So yeah, please stop by, say hi to us, things like that. And if you do have any questions, any ideas, we're always looking to, have conversations with librarians, answer questions that they might have. You can contact us on social media. Here are all of our socials. And of course, there's our website and our Style Expert email. So thank you all so much, and I'll turn it back over to Sabrina to close us out.
Great. Thanks, Samantha. Yeah, I'll just echo Samantha and say thanks so much to all of our panelists today. And thank you for taking the time to speak with us. And thank you to our attendees for your questions and your comments. I'd like to remind our viewers that we did record today's program, so be on the lookout for a follow-up email from Choice and ACRL with a link to the recording and where to access today's slides. Also, if you have a few minutes after the presentation to fill out a brief survey, we would really appreciate it. So thanks again to all of you out there for joining us. We hope you learned something new from the webinar and hope to see you again soon on another session.